Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pierce. This is Ukraine War News Update. First part there for the 2nd of November 2024. Sorry I'm a little bit late. I've been arguing to toss with my mate about American politics for the last hour on Facebook Messenger. I also went to the cult last night, had a jolly good night. Rain to Spirit Walker to Love Removal Machine. What a sec. Anyway, so I'm a little bit worse for wear again today. Let's go to the Ukrainian General Staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveats apply. And we can see some fairly challenging numbers for the Russians again. Not as high as we've seen on the last few days. In some of the categories, 1,270 is an incredibly high number of people to lose in a single day. But it is lower than the 1,300 top end of the range that I've been talking about, 1,000 to 1,300. We've seen it well over that recently. So to come down below 1,300, you might think, oh, that's low, but it is still just a massively high number. So the upper end of the range we would normally expect, and even that was way above the range that we used to expect, which is like when it got to 1,000, we're like, oh my goodness, this is insane. Now our benchmarks have been completely skewed because of what has been happening in the last year. 8 tanks lost is a snip below the daily average. I think that's still contextually quite high for this period of the war. 17 armoured personnel vehicles, likewise a snip below the daily average. And 37 artillery systems, almost double the daily average there. 76 vehicles and fuel tanks, that's high. And 4 pieces of special equipment. It's interesting, someone was saying yesterday with regard to Andrew Perpetua's sort of stats and whatnot, I talked about combat asset losses going from artillery down to APCs and MRAPs down here. So that's the Russian combat asset losses, and the Ukrainian combat asset losses of that, so that's about 2 to 1 Russian to Ukrainian. But he was saying that actually, since they are using ATVs and buggies as combat assets effectively, you should really be throwing that into this list as well. And yeah, arguably there should be some civilian vehicles and ATVs and whatnot thrown into the combat asset losses. But I guess we're talking in terms of the value of those vehicles kind of monetarily and the capabilities of those vehicles in terms of, you know, their armaments, etc., etc. And while the golf buggies and ATVs might be used functionally as the same kind of thing, there's a completely different value to those monetarily, but I suppose if they're using them functionally similarly, then there's a much closer degree of value there. It depends how you look at the term value, but anyway, I won't be putting in ATVs and whatnot to combat asset losses, but I get the point. It is salient, right? Okay, we have 3 to 1 loss ratio, Russian to Ukrainian losses. So another bad day at the office for the Russians. Let's look at the Ukrainian losses, and actually both sides have quite a lot of surveillance and comms equipment. This is for the Ukrainians, it's mainly in terms of Starlinks, and actually, as I've said before, they're really quite cheap these days. Starlinks, incredibly valuable and useful, to talk about value in a different way. They are insanely valuable for either side, but they aren't crazy expensive. And so, you know, is that the sort of kit that we put on the list to compare? Well, actually, these lists aren't created for me, so, you know, it's irrelevant as to what I think. So I would ignore all of those. Now, with the Russians, the surveillance and comm equipment that you got, Starlink, you got Muron M. That's again another small bit of kit. That one's probably the one in a building window where a drone goes in and takes it out. And comms equipment can be fairly low key in terms of, you know, comparing it to, say, a tank. We have a P-18 radar here, which is much more significant there. In fact, just to remind people what that looks like, P-18 radar, because we often forget, it is one of these larger bits of kit there, as you can see. That is that. So that is more significant. I wonder what the value is of a P-18. Let's put that in. Value. And I don't know if we'll see that come up. No, it's not telling me immediately the value. But I think that's going to be a much more significant loss for the Ukrainians than the sort of comms equipment, etc., etc. But yeah, often we have a bit of, AI tells us, but the way that Bing they've changed it a little bit, Copilot. Here we go. this sometimes tells us. So we can let that do its thing and see if it comes up with, oh, okay. Value of the P-18 radar can vary depending on the specific model and any upgrades it has received. For instance, Poland recently ordered 24 modernized P-18L radars for approximately $785 million. The price includes the cost of the radar system, logistics, and training packages. So, yeah, 785 divided by 24 would be an upgraded version of that. So, I don't know. There you go. There's a little indication. But you at least know what it is. Then, as far as the combat asset losses, we have 1 artillery piece, 2 tanks, a couple of infantry fighting vehicles, including a damaged Bradley. Then we have 4 APCs, usual Western kind of kit, and then quite a few MRAPs, and that would suggest the Ukrainians are attacking. That's probably due to the Kursk region. We have Kirpies, Max Pros, we've got a Bushmaster in there, Australian provided one, destroyed, so on and so forth, and some civilian pieces of kit below that, sort of SUVs and whatnot. Okay, then when we come to the Russian losses, we have a Buk M2 that is damaged. So that is an air defense system there. We've got an engineering vehicle and a recovery vehicle, destroyed and damaged. And then an interesting array of artillery pieces going from sort of larger bits of kit down to anti-tank guns to the D20s, D30s. And an M46, a very old howitzer there. I'd say very old as if D20s and D30s aren't already very old. So yeah, that is that. Then we're on to tanks. We've got about 8 tanks here, most of them tracked garden sheds. So these tanks with huge buildings put on top of them, essentially, that restricts their use of the turret. So are these broken tanks that are used as APCs? Are these working tanks, but they're much more useful as APCs? Is this an indication that tanks are somewhat obsolete compared to what their needs, what the Russian forces need, etc., etc.? All these questions we keep asking. But to have 5 out of 8 tanks being track garden sheds being destroyed, one with a mine roller, I think tells us certainly something. There's something significant going on with the Russian forces if they are doing that. Yeah, and infantry fighting vehicles, we've got quite a few of these, almost, I'd say, well, probably around 15 or so. BMP 1s, 2s, 3s, BTRs, usual kind of culprits, and some APCs thrown in there, and an MRAP for good measure. Kozak MRAP that we see the Ukrainians use. Sometimes you get vehicles that are captured and then destroyed by the other side, and you're trying to work out exactly, what the provenance is. Quite a lot of trucks and civilian vehicles and ATVs. So just a lot more kit lost by the Russians than the Ukrainians. Bad day at the office for the Russians in comparison, but this is what we have come to expect from the Russians day after day. What else is of note? So here we have a HIMARS strike. Aerial Reconnaissance Unit Skyforce on the 108th Territorial Defence Brigade spotted and directed a HIMARS and cluster artillery strike on a group of around 40 Russian forces in the Zaporizhia region. The strike resulted in at least 10 Russian casualties and destroyed a gas vehicle. So this is HIMARS still being used, cluster munition being used here to, and this is the importance of reconnaissance, carefully surveying areas and seeing vehicles hide themselves. This is interesting because you've got quite a lot of people. You've got a vehicle hiding in a tree line, then they put over a cover of the vehicle and then it drives off. I do wonder whether this was from some time ago. Is that more summer foliage or is that going towards autumn? I don't know. It looks a little bit more summery to me. But anyway, that's destruction of a bunch of vehicle and some accumulated troops as well. And then we go. I just want to show you this, as this isn't anything to do necessarily with the military. I don't know who filmed this, but check out this drone operator. Drone warfare is about to get so crazy. It already is, right? Look at the skills of this drone operator. It's quite incredible. And then imagine that this is following people or searching for stuff or whatever. Look at, and this will be speeded up, right? So, take that into account. But going into buildings, of course, to be able to do that and still get a signal is impressive. Just going around the stairwell there, incredibly impressive. I mean, this takes some look underneath there. That takes some serious skills to be able to do this, going upside down and come back, and it's just incredible. So that you put a warhead on that, it's just incredibly scary stuff, isn't it? The skills of these operators is something to behold. And of course, you're now having, oh dear, you now have certain operators who've been doing this for a couple of years. You just imagine how good they are at it. Right, moving on to distant strikes. The Ukrainian Air Force has reported Shahid drone attacks again, a huge amount of them. 71 sent in. 39 were shot down, intercepted conventionally, 21 taken down by electronic warfare, so that is 60. That leaves 11 left. 5 were returned to Russia. 5 were still in the air at the time of reporting this. So that appears that at least 1 has hit its target or not been taken down. Possibly as many as 6, but that could just be all 5 of the rest that were in the air were shot down. Who knows? And then there was 1 missile, 0 out of the KH-31P anti-radiation missile. So that they've obviously had success, or at least that hasn't been shot down. And being an anti-radiation missile, you're hoping that's not taking out a radar, because that's what that would be used for. Now, when you look at these, a composite basically of all of the infographics, you understand how many drones are being sent in, and there are all these reports coming out that, you know, it's broken records this month. It's been absolutely terrible for the Ukrainians. The Russians have just been sending in wave after wave after wave. And remember, on each of these infographics, these are the ones intercepted. So even on a day when you've only got, say, 9 there, that doesn't mean that there's only 9 sent. There could have been 25 sent on that day, but most of them were taken out by electronic warfare, and then some of them got through. So remember that you can pretty much multiply all these by 2. I think, generally speaking, often. Some days electronic warfare takes out more than the interceptions. These are just conventional interceptions. It's not the total number that was sent. So incredibly, composite, the Ukrainian Air Force report shows the only day in all of October that Russia didn't attack Ukraine cities with drones and missiles was October the 14th. Symbols show below illustrate those shot down by air defences. The total number is around 2,000 over 60 a day. So 60 a day on average being sent into Ukraine. Absolutely incredible. And to remind you, there's a couple of videos I want to play you because I just want to give you a sense of what it sounds like and what people in, say, Kiev have to put up with, and Kharkiv and everywhere, day after day after day. And this is over Kiev. So that's your drone just flying. And of course, quite often these drones get taken out over Kiev, right? They get through air defenses and they eventually get taken out. Kiev seems to generally take out close to 100% of the drones that come over, but a lot of them are taken out over Kiev, and that causes its own problem. What goes up must come down. Here we have, another one here. Marginally different angle and time there, but same sort of thing. Air raid also going off, and lasting 5 hours. People's sleep patterns have been absolutely decimated. Debris fallen on 6 districts in Kiev overnight. So really another widespread wave of attacks. But you've also got Kharkiv at the moment being absolutely hammered. So Russia says its ballistic strikes in Kharkiv hit Ukraine's National Guard Academy yesterday. They speculate it was turned into a temporary housing for foreign mercenaries, and at least 40 have been killed. There's no evidence to support that, but yesterday Kharkiv was struck big time. And update now, 40 people are confirmed injured in the attack on the police station in the city. Russia says it hit a military base. 30 officers are injured, 9 civilians and 1 rescue worker after S-400 missiles hit the city. So they are the surface-to-air missiles used in the ground attack mode, slamming into a police station that the Russians accuse of being a military base, but it appears to be a police station. 30 people injured there. And then we have a double tap strike Oh, I did have that. Have I? Where's it gone? Should have it. Here it is. Okay, so this is seen out of a window. This is double tap strike on Kharkiv. So a 500 kilogram bomb landed initially, and then they waited for the arrival of rescue workers and then struck again with the goal of maximum civilian casualties. Russian airfield that launches these attacks is still under US protection, essentially by restricting missile strikes on those airfields. Now, Kiev Independent reports that the Russian military has carried out at least 36 double-tap strikes against Ukraine from the start of the full-scale invasion in February 2022 to August of this year. And obviously that's going to be more now, killing over 100 people, according to a recent report by Truth Hounds, a Ukrainian non-profit. So double taps are war crimes. They are trying to kill emergency service members, to strike terror into the communities and kill effectively civilian workers, really. Sumy was also battered with various weapons last night. Power's out in some areas after aerial bombs hit the region. And in the city, at least 5 people are in hospital after a drone hit a multi-story apartment block there. So Sumy getting an awful lot of attention, as it does on a regular basis. Sumy and Kharkiv are not places you would want to live, and yet, Kharkiv is Ukraine's second biggest city. It's heartbreaking. Right, Ukraine's president lambasted West for waiting for North Korea's soldiers to start attacking. I get this, I agree with this, and I can understand his anger. We could strike preemptively if we had this opportunity, but instead of necessary long-range strikes, USA, Britain and Germany are simply watching. That's what Zelensky said last night. So we're kind of waiting for North Korea to do something, and then we go, okay, let's react. And even then, it's almost certainly going to be an underwhelming reaction. Ukraine could have preemptively taken out these North Koreans, but we don't allow them. But aside from that, Ukraine is also facing one of Russia's most powerful offensives since the start of the all-out war, and that is according to Syrskyi, the commander-in-chief. So, after a meeting with the delegation of Czech armed forces, he described the situation on the battlefield as difficult. Particularly in Donetsk, quite active hostilities that continue in certain areas require constant renewal of the resources of the Ukrainian units. Since the beginning of the day, 126 clashes between Ukrainian and Russian forces have taken place along the front line. Russia continues to press forward its offensives across the eastern front, primarily in Kharkiv, Pokrovsk directions, and the Ukrainians are outnumbered and outgunned, and being forced to withdraw little by little. In Kharkiv Oblast, Ukrainian forces liberated and cleared out in mid-October the village of Krylyakivka, which Ukraine's military intelligence describes as important for the defense of Kupiansk. However, there are claims that has been taken by the Russians. I know Suryat Map has that under Russian control now. So it's just, really difficult. In a recent interview, Zelensky blasted Ukraine's partners' zero response to deployment of North Korean troops for the war in Ukraine. He said if Kiev had permission to use Western long-range weapons on Russian territory, it could preemptively target every camp where North Korean troops are gathering. They know where they are, they just can't hit them. And they can't hit them because they're not being allowed to. But anyway, Ukraine is holding back Russia's most powerful offensive since the start of the war. It's difficult, and there are claims that, I don't know if I've got that here, but it claims that the Ukrainians have enough troops for 6 to 12 months of war still. So they're in a pretty desperate situation at the moment. This war is going on longer, I think, than people had initially envisaged, although some were saying it has every potential of being a very long war. But even Zelensky and his own team were hoping, since the initial defense of Ukraine was well received around the world, and people were like, Ukraine can do this, and then I think they got sucked into thinking we could win this without realizing Russia's propensity to send people endlessly into war to die, to take small amounts of land, people and equipment, and Ukraine is just unable to be able to answer that in terms of equipment and personnel themselves. Now, Tim White, #Russia is collapsing, says a whole spate of emergency landings have taken place in Russia this week. This time, a Rossiya Airlines passenger jet flying from St. Petersburg to Alma-Ata has hurriedly diverted to Moscow's Sheremetyevo airport due to a fuel leak. And that's just one of, I think, others. So just to remind people of the aviation issues due to sanctions. And then, oh, goodness me, Tim White reporting that a US citizen holds a press conference in Moscow admitting to being a spy for Russia in Ukraine since the 11th of February 2022. So this chap, Daniel Martindale, showed his passport saying he intends to apply for Russian citizenship after being extracted from Ukraine, where he helped Russia kill citizens. Just bad human being. My goodness. I don't know how people get sucked into doing this for Russia. I don't understand how you can be killing Ukrainians and think, yeah, this is the right thing to do. This is morally good and proper. I don't understand it. I don't understand it. Anyway, thanks for watching. Really appreciate your support. Somewhat shorter one today. I'll get on with my other videos. Take care, guys, and I'll speak to you soon.